There is a kind of silence that does not look holy from the outside. It looks like you lost the argument. It looks like you had no answer. It looks like you let them speak over you. Twist the story. Repeat your name in rooms you were not standing in, and walk away with the confidence of someone who believes the last voice is always the strongest voice. But you knew what would happen if you replied from pain. You knew one sentence, spoken while your chest was burning, could be taken, cut in half, passed around, and used as proof against you. So you went home with the words still stuck in your throat. You made wudu with shaky hands. You stood in prayer while the house was quiet, and the part of you that wanted to explain everything kept rising and falling inside you like a storm trapped behind your ribs. That night, you did not feel powerful. You felt tired. You felt misunderstood. You wondered why Allah allowed them to keep speaking while you were trying so hard to stay clean in your response. And then, slowly, life began to show you something. The person who kept accusing you started contradicting themselves. The one who acted innocent in public became careless in private. The one who tried to make you look unstable became impatient when you stopped reacting. Their own words began to expose what your anger could never have proven. That this is not about revenge. It is not about watching people fall. It is about understanding a hidden mercy. Sometimes Allah protects you by not letting you interrupt the evidence while it is still unfolding. The hardest part was not only what they said, it was the way they said it with calm faces, soft voices, and selective memory. Someone could sit across from others and describe you as difficult, ungrateful, too sensitive, or impossible to please, while leaving out the messages you never showed anyone, the insults you swallowed, the guilt they placed on you, the moments they pushed until your heart almost broke. That is a heavy test because it touches the human need to be known correctly. A believer is not made of stone. You can trust Allah and still feel the ache of being misrepresented. You can have sabr and still feel your hands tremble after a conversation. You can make dua and still replay the scene in your mind, wondering if your silence looked like guilt. But there is a difference between pain and panic. Panic makes you chase every rumor. Panic makes you argue with people who already decided what they wanted to believe. Panic makes you hand your peace to anyone who misunderstands you. Sabr, when it is real, makes you slow down before your wound becomes your leader. It teaches you to ask, will this answer please Allah, or will it only feed my ego for a moment? That question changes everything. If this touches a place in you, let this video carry a quiet lichen from you, not as noise, but as a small mark that you understand how much strength it takes to remain measured when your heart is under pressure, because the one being tested is not always the loudest person in the room. Sometimes the test belongs to the one who has every reason to speak, yet chooses not to turn truth into a weapon. There are two ways a person can respond when someone tries to provoke them. One way is to rush forward and fight with the same energy being thrown at them. They answer every accusation, expose every private detail, gather screenshots, speak in anger, and for a few minutes it feels like justice. But after the heat leaves, they may realize they entered the very trap that was set for them. The other person wanted a reaction, not a conversation. They wanted one sharp sentence they could carry around and say, "See, this is what I was talking about." The second way is harder. You notice the bait and step back from it. You answer only what needs to be answered. You refuse to perform your pain for people who are not seeking truth. You leave the gathering before your tongue becomes reckless. You pause before replying to the message that was written to disturb your sleep. You do not pretend you are unaffected, but you refuse to let your nafs drive the car. This is where silence becomes discipline. Not every silence is worship, because sometimes silence comes from fear, manipulation, or avoidance. But the silence that comes from remembering Allah, restraining harm, and protecting the truth from being dragged into ugliness can become an act of obedience. You may not feel rewarded in the moment. You may feel humiliated. Yet later, when the situation continues without your interference, you may see the difference between someone defending themselves and someone being defended by circumstances Allah allowed to unfold. The person who needed your anger to complete their story becomes restless without it. They repeat themselves too much. They add details that do not match. They demand loyalties from people instead of trusting clarity. And little by little, what was hidden begins to look visible. This does not mean every person who hurts you is secretly plotting against you. That is an important line to hold, because wounded hearts can start seeing enemies everywhere. Some people misunderstand because they are tired. Some speak harshly because they never learned gentleness. Some withdraw because they are carrying battles you know nothing about. Islam does not ask you to turn pain into suspicion. Basira, spiritual insight, is not paranoia with religious language. It is the calm ability to see patterns without losing mercy. A friend who cancels plans twice may simply be overwhelmed. A family member who speaks clumsily may still love you. A colleague who seems distant may be under pressure, but repeated patterns matter. When someone is warm in front of others, but cold when no one can see, pay attention. When they apologize only to regain access, then return to the same harm, pay attention. When they praise you while you are useful and punish you when you set a boundary, pay attention. When they need you confused so they can stay in control, pay attention. Paying attention is not bitterness. It is stewardship over the heart Allah gave you. You do not have to accuse everyone. You do not have to announce what you noticed. You can simply stop giving the same access to someone who has shown you they do not handle your trust with amanah. This is where many believers struggle, because they think forgiveness means pretending nothing happened. Forgiveness can cleanse your heart while boundaries protect your life. You can make dua for someone and still not hand them the knife again. You can wish them guidance and still step away from the pattern that keeps pulling you into fitna. Think of the person who spoke badly about you behind your back and then smiled when they saw you, as if the air between you carried no weight. Before, you might have rushed to confront them in front of everyone. You might have demanded loyalty from mutual friends. You might have spent days trying to correct every version of the story. But this time, something in you was different. You greeted them with adab, kept your words clean, and observed, not in an obsessive way, but with a heart asking Allah for clarity. Then it happened naturally. In one conversation, they said they had not spoken to anyone about you. Later, without realizing it, they mentioned a detail only someone involved in the gossip would know. Another time, they claimed they wanted peace, but their questions were shaped like traps, fishing for a reaction they could report to others. You did not need to expose them. Their inconsistency did what your anger would have done poorly. And because you stayed composed, the people watching were not distracted by your reaction. They could finally see the behavior itself. This is one of the quiet ways Allah may protect a servant. He may allow a person to continue speaking long enough that their speech reveals the condition behind it. He may delay the moment of clarity, not to punish you, but to keep you from entering the mud before the truth has become visible. Your role is not to celebrate someone's exposure. Your role is to remain clean when the truth appears, because if your heart becomes arrogant at that moment, you may pass one test and fail another. The believer does not say, "I knew Allah would humiliate them." The believer says, "Alhamdulillah for being saved from reacting in a way that would have harmed my own soul." And sometimes the test comes through people close enough to know exactly which words will hurt you. A stranger's insult may pass through your day and disappear, but a family member's guilt can sit inside your chest for years. They may say, "After everything I did for you," when you try to make a reasonable decision. They may call your boundary disrespect. They may turn your need for peace into proof that you think you are better than them. And because you care about family ties, you feel trapped between obedience to Allah and emotional exhaustion. This is where silence must be joined with wisdom. Silence does not mean letting someone rewrite your life while you disappear. It may mean choosing the right words at the right time instead of reacting to the first provocation. It may sound like, "I hear that you are upset, but I cannot continue this conversation if I am being insulted." It may mean leaving the room before voices rise. It may mean replying the next morning instead of at midnight when everyone is emotional. It may mean seeking counsel from someone grounded, not someone who only fuels your anger. Tawakkul is not passivity. It is doing what is right without worshipping the outcome. You act with adab. You keep ties where possible. You protect yourself from harm, and you leave the unseen parts to Allah. There is no holiness in being crushed by avoidable chaos. There is also no maturity in using boundaries as revenge. The path is thinner than the ego wants it to be. It requires you to be firm without becoming cruel, forgiving without becoming careless, and silent without becoming dishonest. That balance is difficult, which is why it purifies. There may have been a moment when someone tried to trigger you so carefully that you almost admired how patient their strategy was. They sent a message full of half-truths. They spoke over you, then accused you of not communicating. They poked the same old wound, the one they knew carried history, and waited for the version of you they could label unstable. In the past, that version may have appeared. You may have raised your voice, written paragraphs, cried in frustration, or begged to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. But this time, you noticed the heat rising and did not obey it. You put the phone down. You breathed. You prayed 2 rak'ahs badly, but sincerely, with a mind still scattered and a heart still loud. You asked Allah not only to show you the truth, but to protect you from becoming unfair while you were hurt. That dua matters, because oppression does not give you permission to become oppressive. Later, when you returned to the situation, you saw what you could not see while angry. The message did not require a long defense. It required one calm answer or no answer at all. The old trigger had lost some of its power. That is a form of victory people rarely talk about, because no one claps when you do not explode. No one sees the battle you fought inside your own chest, but Allah sees the moment you swallowed the sentence that would have damaged you. He sees the restraint nobody praises. Later in this video, share one moment in the comments when silence protected you from making the situation worse. Not the private details, just the lesson your heart learned from it. Sometimes naming the lesson helps someone else recognize their own test with more mercy. A counterexample is needed here because not every silence is noble. There are times when speaking is necessary. If someone is being harmed, abused, exploited, or falsely accused in a way that creates real damage, silence can become negligence. If a person's reputation, safety, marriage, work, or faith is being seriously harmed, seeking help is not a lack of tawakkul. Reporting harm, asking for mediation, documenting what happened, or involving trustworthy people can be part of justice. The Prophet's way was not cowardice wrapped in patience. It was truth with wisdom, courage with restraint, mercy without surrendering to falsehood. So do not use spiritual language to stay in a situation Allah has given you lawful means to address. The point is not to become voiceless. The point is to stop being controlled by the demand to react instantly. There is a difference between speaking from clarity and speaking from injury. One comes after prayer, thought, and concern for what pleases Allah. The other comes from a wound trying to win. When you speak from clarity, your words tend to be fewer, cleaner, and more useful. You do not need to exaggerate. You do not need to gather a crowd. You do not need to destroy someone to explain what happened. And if you must take action, you take it without turning your heart into a courtroom where you replay the case every hour. Allah's justice is not dependent on your obsession. That sentence may be difficult to accept when you have been wronged, because obsession can feel like loyalty to the truth, but sometimes it is only another chain. You can pursue what is right and still sleep. You can set a boundary and still make dhikr. You can tell the truth and still refuse to become consumed by the person who hurt you. One of the signs that Allah is healing your basira is that you begin to notice consequences before they become disasters. You start seeing the small inconsistency before you hand over deep trust. You hear the envy hidden inside a compliment and do not rush to hate the person. You simply become careful with what you share. You notice that a certain conversation always leaves you spiritually drained, so you stop entering it without necessity. You realize that explaining your growth to someone committed to your old image is like pouring water into a cracked cup and blaming yourself for the floor being wet. This kind of clarity often comes after loneliness. Not dramatic loneliness, not the kind people post about, but the quiet kind, where you stop being invited because you no longer play your assigned role. You used to be the one who absorbed disrespect to keep the mood peaceful. You used to answer immediately because you feared being called selfish. You used to apologize even when you were not wrong, because silence from others felt unbearable. Then Allah placed you in a season where those habits no longer worked. The same people who benefited from your lack of boundaries became confused by your calm distance. Some called it arrogance. Some called it coldness. Some tested you harder. But you were not becoming cruel. You were becoming responsible for the soul you will stand with before Allah. That responsibility changes your timing. You no longer treat every accusation as an emergency. You no longer confuse guilt with guidance. You no longer think love requires self-erasure. And when people can no longer control you through reaction, they often reveal what they wanted from you in the first place. Not because you trapped them, but because restraint removed the fog. Their impatience became visible. Their entitlement became audible. Their need to dominate could no longer hide behind your emotional responses. By the time the truth becomes clearer, the deepest change may not be what happens to them. It may be what happens to you. You stop needing a public scene to feel that Allah saw you. You stop measuring justice only by whether others admit they were wrong. You learn that some apologies may never come, and still your heart can be returned to you. You learn that Allah's protection sometimes looks like delay, distance, unanswered messages, closed doors, and the strange discomfort that keeps you from trusting someone too quickly. You learn that the silence you once hated became a shelter. It gave you time to separate truth from ego, pain from guidance, and patience from fear. It kept your tongue from signing a confession your heart did not owe. It kept you from stepping into the role they prepared for you. And when their own behavior finally showed what your soul had sensed, you did not need to become loud. You only needed to become grateful and careful. This path is not about being better than people. It is about being answerable to Allah in moments when no one else knows the full story. So keep your dua alive, keep your manners intact, keep your boundaries honest, and let time carry what your anger would have mishandled. There are traps that collapse only after you stop trying to prove they exist. And sometimes your silence is not the absence of power. It is the place where Allah removes you from the trap before the trap falls in on itself.